Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to do an album review today, which is where we check out an entire album track by track, exploring what each song does in isolation and its purpose and its goal and what it does within the larger work of the album. Today we're going to be exploring the album Rain Upon the Impure by the group The Ruins of Beverast. Now, I don't know a lot about this group. I saw that it was a one-man band, and that person also was in another band. I think it was black metal. So I'm expecting some sort of extreme metal, probably black metal since that's where they came from. But people can explore other types of areas, and it might be that as a solo artist, they wanted to get away from what they do in their usual bands. I know we have 80 minutes of this ahead of us, although there's only 5 real songs in there, as we have 2 interludes, one just over a minute and one just above 2.5. Now, 2.5 doesn't sound too bad, a little short for a metal track, sure, but close to a pop album length, a pop song length. But I call them interludes because the other 5 tracks are all over 13 minutes long. So we have 5 epics and 2 short interludes on here. The low track list probably means it's going to be a shorter video, probably looking at 2:45, maybe 3 hours. I'm not. It's going to be black metal, isn't it? I don't know. I don't see like an illegible band logo on the album art though, so maybe it won't be. I don't know. Maybe we'll be surprised. Let's just dive in. That's the best way to explore music. 50 forts along the Rhine. Okay. So I have some field recordings. There's a horse neighing, whinnying. Yeah, whinnying. We're trudging through water. There's some winds. Lots of reverb. Like a beast attacking. I mean, that all tells a story all on its own. Okay. This is neat. This will change though, right? This is just like the opening of the song. I can't make out anything here. At least I could hear the melody in the last section. Halftime. That melody line just kind of cut out abruptly. I thought maybe it'd do call and response against the choir, but it's not doing that either. Maybe? Kind of? Yeah, all I hear is a snarling dog from the vocals. It's impossible to make out sounds, linguistic sounds. Kind of going for melodic idea, but it's just the same lick over and over and over. I mean, which makes sense. We're hyper-focusing on atmosphere, that's black metal's bread and butter. So we half-timed the halftime. Also, the guitar riff is the first time that we have different note lengths, using a combination of quarter notes and eighth notes. Prior to this, it was all eighths or all sixteenths. Going for a little bit of atmospheric storytelling here with those nice bends. I mean, it's probably the point of the song, but it is really going nowhere fast. That was talk about a strange decision, timbre-wise and harmonically. The chord progression. Also, this is blazingly fast. This is faster than our A section was. Not even time for the snare beats to reverberate before the next snare hit comes in. Yeah, the snare is not turned off, I don't think. But it's just being played too fast to get the full snare timbre out of it. Another section that just keeps going on, though. There it is. This. Yeah, this is our A section. So this is how fast the song started, which is a bit slower than where we just were. Yeah, I mean, that's... You can hear a little bit more of the snare on this. There's just more room for it to showcase more of its color. Some interesting stuff with the volume too. You can see over there, it's just barely above where the album art curves. So we're below maximum volume, which is the top of the album art border. It's also a hair bit of extra volume on the left channel than the right. this just going to transition to the next track? Because I'm going to have to stop it. We can't listen to 30 minutes straight. Oh no. Back to what we had at the beginning. I think that does transition. Now, we only have 1 more second, so... Oh. Well, let's start with the field recording stuff. I think that's kind of cool. You know, at the beginning, we had the horses whinnying, we had wind blowing, we had water sloshing. It kind of feels, at least to me, like it's ankle deep enough to create some sloshing sound without it being something with a lot of force behind it, a lot of displacement going on. So, you know, just a little bit of the leg. Whereas something like hip level, waist level, I think would have a bigger sound to it. So we're walking through water. At the beginning, we have this wind, right, and horses. So it makes me think of like outside. But here we had some sort of like male choir-esque voice reverberating, which makes me feel like we're in a small space now. Maybe we've gone from a forest into a cavern or a cave. All of this kind of puts me into the story of what's going on here. A lot more than the music does. We'll touch on that. That came off a bit more biting than I think I wanted it to. But I appreciate it because it's giving me something to sort of attempt to view the music through. It's creating a visual component, a story being told through just those elements, where I can kind of piece together what the song is doing based on where we were and where we are now. I also just think it's a little odd, little different. Not a lot of bands use field recording. That's used in more experimental and avant-garde works. And I find it to be interesting with its use of something traditional in the realms of extreme metal, which is this third wave black metal stuff. It's kind of neat. It sets the stage, almost like this is part of a multimedia project. We're just missing the visual part. Like maybe it's a musical, right? And so we come in on scene and we're sloshing through this water, and then we get the musical part. Somebody sings about what they want out of life or whatever, and then the musical part ends and we're still sloshing through this water. The story continues on outside of the musical component. We're just missing the visual part, but we still have the audio of the performance or the acting or the film or whatever. So I kind of like that. I think that's a cool thing. I wonder if they're going to do that throughout the whole album. It does sound like this is going to be our transition to the next track, and I wonder if they're going to consistently use these field recordings as transitions, connecting this entire album. Now, on Thursday, sounds from my inbox, we listened to a band. It was the last one on the day. Was it Monnier? Was that how it was pronounced? Very straightforward third wave black metal. And I had mentioned in there that I was going to try to do my best to be objective about the song because subjectively I'm just the wrong person for that music. The same is true here, and I'm worried that I'm going to let down the person who requested this album. I know I'm one of the few reactors on YouTube who does black metal reactions in general, but also does black metal reactions and attempts to dig into what makes them great. Or why people enjoy them, I suppose would be another way to go about it. But y'all know black metal is not my jam. And for something like this, that whose inspiration is so strongly third wave black metal and has a lower fidelity production, not only is this not my cup of tea casually, but I don't even think I'm going to be able to do a great job analytically. I have a tough time engaging with this on any level. Because at the end of the day, it's black metal. There's a lot of repetition to it. A lot of the rhythmic ideas are hyper rigid. There's basically no elements of contrast or dynamic writing in here. And it's compressed so badly that I can barely hear much of the nuance. That's not to say that it was 13 minutes of one concept. We did move through a few parts, and I do want to touch on especially some of the middle sections as we slowed down the song and attempted to look at something a bit more melodic. But generally speaking, I think that a majority of this video is just going to be the runtime of listening to the songs. I don't really know how much feedback I can have on this, especially if every track moving on is similar to this one. So I suppose I should get the big thing out of the way, which is the production of it. It is hyper compressed. I can't hear much of anything. I picked up a guitar riff at the beginning. I picked up a guitar riff at the end. There were a few sections where additional layers completely obscured everything, and all I could hear is a static, a white noise. The vocals are indistinguishable. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more later. It is a hazy, low fidelity production. It's hard for me to hear the details in it. It creates a specific atmosphere that I'm sure people enjoy, but to me, I can't even find it oppressive. It's missing the weight because so much of the power has been removed in an effort to create this feeling, this fidelity, this haziness. It just kind of is. It's something that's sitting in front of me that feels like it should be pushed to my periphery, but I can't put it over there. Kind of makes it annoying. I don't want anyone to walk away from oh, Bryan was just annoyed by this pick. At only 13 minutes in, he wasn't even, a seventh through the album, and he was already annoyed by it. No, but I do find elements of black metal they drain on me, right? I don't know how I'm going to make it through 80 minutes of this. I really don't. I guess the good part is that there's really only 5 tracks and we're done with one of them. So just keep trucking through is how I'm going to approach this. And I don't want to just make a blanket statement that black metal is bad. We've had some black metal songs and even albums in the past that even if I didn't enjoy them, I could appreciate them and found some interesting things to talk about. I don't know that this album is going to be one of those. Again, I'm making assumptions based off of one track. Granted, that one track is a very big portion of the album's runtime, but it is just based off of the opening track, and we do have 6 more ahead of us that could drastically change all sorts of things, from production to composition. We could even have some stylistic changes. We've listened to some albums in the past where each track is basically a different genre altogether. 2 bands that come to mind there are Trollhagen and Unexpect. Will Wood also had an album that was rather diverse throughout. I mean, it's possible, right? But also I have a gut feeling that says in this case it's improbable. We're probably going to get an hour and a half of straightforward third wave black metal. Now, with Atmopshere out of the way, the vocals. I want to talk a little bit about myself, my own works, real quick. Before I get into the vocals, I run an activity on the Discord server for everybody, whether you've made music before or not, called a composition jam. And every month, I give a directive and objective of what your music should contain. I try not to make it too complex. I don't utilize much chord theory or even music theory in general for it. I really want it to be inviting to anyone of any level. And since there's a lot of free tools out there, I encourage anybody to just install an audio workstation and a couple of free sound libraries and make stuff. I think it's a very freeing thing to do, and I think it's cool for people who didn't know they could make music to give it a try and find out that anybody can honestly make music. And so the goal last month was to make a song using only 2 chords. And I figured I was going to sit on 1 chord for a long time and then shift to the other chord as a type of uplift. I didn't know if it was going to be to end the song or if I was going to sit in this uplift for a while and maybe return back down. I didn't quite have all that planned out, but I knew this was the general idea. I wanted this hyper fixation on a singular feeling, and so I approached a bunch of music that I wanted to take inspiration from. I listened to some classical that sort of sat within a sound. I listened to some post music, and I listened to black metal. Black metal tends to have chord progressions in it, but the atmosphere tends to be similar. I decided I was going to make a black metal track. So I have some ostinatos violins going so I can get the 16th note idea. I threw them through like distortion, compression, overdrive. I made some like blasted out drums and just like really fast drum ideas. I'll tell you one thing I learned. Lo-fi production is not easy to do. There is a huge skill behind making low fidelity palatable. You can't just crank a bunch of knobs to the extremes and then say, hey, look, it sounds terrible, because it does sound terrible and no one wants to listen to that. So I have an appreciation for low fidelity production now. It isn't just bad, it's bad but good. And that's really hard to achieve. But the other thing I decided to do after laying down some musical ideas is it needed vocals on top of it. And with only a few days left before the month was over and me running out of steam for the project, as I just really wasn't connecting with the sound of it, I didn't like where it was going, and I was vastly outside of the headspace of where I was when I started the project. I just wanted it to be over with. I didn't want to write lyrics. So I just made sounds with my mouth and put natural compression on them, did, some harsh vocal stuff, and then doctored it a little bit in post, because I'm not a really good harsh vocalist. I'm definitely not a really good black metal harsh vocalist. But yeah, it was just like, wow, yeah, and then once I like put the compression on it, I actually harshed it out, screamed it out or whatever, and then tweaked it a little bit, make it sound nice and full. It didn't sound too bad, actually. And the fact that I wasn't really saying syllables didn't really matter much, because I tucked it into the mix like black metal does, and it kind of it felt like real black metal vocals. I'm kind of impressed with that. But it just reminded me how much of black metal and a lot of extreme metal in general, whose lyrics I just can't understand because there's very little enunciation in them. And that's how I felt about this song. I never heard words. I never really even heard enunciation. I didn't hear syllables even. It was just sort of, as I think I mentioned during the reaction, a dog snarling. For all I know, the song doesn't have lyrics, and if I go to a lyric site and find some, I doubt I'll be able to match the sounds to what the vocalist produced in a way that's going to create a disconnect where it feels like they might have just said garblygook in the studio and then typed up some poetry and said, bam, that's what I said, trust me, bro. I don't know if that's actually what happened. I doubt it is, and I bet if I could find some unedited raw vocal stems for these songs, maybe I'd be able to hear the syllables once all the extra production is taken away. But as it is with this song, I barely hear a human voice, much less intelligible language. It kind of matches in with a lot of the rest of the track just being a very hazy, grainy thing that exists sort of on my periphery. I can't quite look at it and see it clearly. I know it's there, I can hear it. I just can't make any sense of it. I fear that this is what the vocals are going to be like this whole song. Just monster noises. And later on, I'll find out it's the most beautiful prose ever. And I'm like, I'm not buying it. This is not what it sounded like you were saying. But yeah, that's where I stand on the vocals for this. I couldn't make them out at all. It just sounded like snarls and growls to me. They did have one really cool thing though. We started off at a very fast 16th note speed. We cut that in half to a halftime feel. Notice I said feel. I think the tempo is identical. We're just not playing 16th notes anymore, which is 4 notes per beat. We're playing 8th notes, which is 2 notes per beat. It sounds half as fast because we're just playing half as many notes, but the tempo is identical. After a while, we cut that in half too and returned to and went to quarter notes, which is 1 note per beat. Cutting it in half. Again, not the tempo, but the feeling of the tempo. I thought this was a pretty cool movement between these ideas, gradually taking, I think, the harmonic ideas present within the guitar riffs and extrapolating on them, slowing them down over time until we got to something that felt semi-melodic, focusing more on the notes themselves than the texture of hitting the string 16 times every bar. It was a neat idea overall, and I thought moving from that to the fastest point of the song was also a pretty cool thing, as we had this gradual slowing down over time and then this immediate spike to a brand new peak. This peak also, I just want to touch on the pure endurance of it coming from the drums. What? The dude is a machine. To think that this might be played live. The alternating bass and snare so fast that the snare doesn't even have time for the snare beads to rumble against the bottom drum head to create that timbre at all, because the drumstick is hitting the snare before that can even happen. And it's so fast. And then having the consistency of these two notes just going back and forth, the snare hit and then the bass kick hit at such a speed, the endurance to keep it up for as long as they did. And even after that, the section we went to afterwards was just a slightly slower section. It was our first A section, which is still fast, still 16th notes, still alternating bass and snare. And to ride that out for the last 3 minutes, it presented a 5-minute gap of just this pure endurance without really a lack of rigidity to it. I don't know, man. This is one of the things that just really blows my mind about black metal. It's the whole endurance side of the equation that comes from the thrash metal roots. Black metal emerged from thrash, right? I've always kind of seen it as speed, thrash, and then thrash branched, where we had like where thrash went, and then black metal, which was like deep frying thrash metal and coming out with something crispy and blackened. That's kind of how I remember it, but I might be a little wrong with that history. But anyways, yeah, just the raw speed of it brings an endurance component that's always just going to leave my jaw on the floor. It is impressive to listen to, and as a fellow musician who has played a little bit of the drums and would never be able to do anything like this, just like massive props. I totally understand the effort that went into practicing and building the muscles for this. And I don't know, it's just bonkers. I feel like I have to bring it up every time, not because I'm obligated to, but because it still blows my mind, even 5 years, 4 years later. I think it's been 4 years since I heard my first black metal track. It's just like, how do these people do this? It makes no sense to me at all. These people are robots. Um, I I gotta bring this up. The pacing on this is just terrible. Maybe there's people who really enjoy this. I'm going to assume that the person who requested the album doesn't mind the length of these tracks at all, nor the length of time that we spend in some of these sections. I feel like the pacing at the beginning was okay. The speed that we moved from the 16th notes to the 8th to the quarter, and then the exploration of the semi-melodic riff there was okay. But this was about the point. I guess it was about 7 minutes in where I felt like the song began to slow down a little bit. This melodic idea just lasts forever. Then we get to the peak speed tempo section, and it's a nice burst of energy, but we also stick in this for a very long time. And then from here, we have like 4 minutes, 3 minutes of returning to our A section, running that out to the end, with the only change being that the riff that we have on the guitar slightly changes on the back half. But the end result, the feeling of the atmosphere, and what most people I think are listening to, doesn't really change much at all throughout this entire 4 minute segment. We have vocals over a little bit of it, and that's it. Man, I just found a lot of this track for me thinking, when are we going to move on? When can the next idea come in? Oh, we're starting this again. There's 16 more bars of the same thing that I've heard 8 times already. And it's just, I felt like I was hostage, being forced to listen to the same thing over and over in order to drive me crazy. This album's going to wear me down. It's going to make me exhausted, but not for the reasons that black metal albums have in the past, which is that they're heavy and weighty and full of despair, or even nihilistic feelings where it's just emotionally draining. This is just going to be tiring for me because I'm not engaging with a lot of it. There's just a lot in this song that repeats. This song should easily have been 7 minutes long, and I don't think much of it would have been altered, aside from the fact I wouldn't be tired, which I guess that in itself alters the experience. For me, it would be for the better, but also it does change it. I mean, that would be like saying this song makes me sad. I would just put it in a major key. Would that really change it much? I mean, yeah, it really would, right? I'm not advocating for this song to have been cut down, but I personally would have enjoyed it more if we had gotten through some of these sections, if we had cut them in half and just moved through the song with a little bit of a quicker, tighter pace. But it's quite possible that feeling drained, feeling like I wish the next thing would happen, feeling like I am imprisoned, is the point of the song. And maybe I am having the intended reaction to it. In which case, bravo. That is a really great artistic vision and execution there. I hate it though. I really did not like being in here. So, there's one more thing that I have written down that I want to talk about, but I kind of want to wait another track. It's Atmopshere. Usually with black metal, as I was just talking about, it's draining for me. It's heavy, it's antagonistic. This isn't. And I think a lot of that's just the low fidelity production, any of the weight that extreme metal tends to carry due to the size of it, the consistency of attacks here, the fact that we have three instruments constantly playing 16 notes every beat for a majority of the track should feel big. It should feel weighty. It should feel like an assault, and it doesn't, because the production robs it of those qualities. It feels small, at least smaller than it should be. It's lacking the width to the sound due to the compression shaving off those elements. It just never quite feels antagonistic. It's like a little buzzing in my ear, a little fly. It's certainly making me feel something. I'm a bit annoyed by it. I wish it would go away, but it's not overbearing like black metal tends to feel for me. Like I said, I want to wait a couple more tracks to really dive into that, but that's where I'm sitting on this one. It never quite clicks. I don't know if that's the low fidelity thing in general or if it was just an aspect of that song. On a side note, sticking with the production topic, I did like the choir and the brass. I thought they were nice additions to the song, especially since they used them sparingly, so it felt like when they came in, it was a nice bright moment of dynamic writing, of contrast, something the song sorely lacks. There isn't a lot of volume contrast in here, there isn't a lot of layering contrast. There's very little rhythmic contrast. We do have that middle section where we shift to eighth notes and then quarter notes and then explore something semi-melodic with the very basic rhythmic syncopation in the guitars. But that's such a short moment of the song that primarily resides on 16th note attacks. It is very static, harmonically, rhythmically, volume wise. There's just no dynamics to it, and the long run time only makes that more apparent with to me through my experience with it. I'm gonna hit some lyrics. I guess we'll move on from there. So a little bit of info. The band was founded by Alexander von Meilenwald, a German drummer, formerly of the band Nagelfar. It is a one-man band. He writes all of the music, but doesn't say he plays it all. I assume he plays drums though, since he was the drummer of the other band. The name is derived from the word Beverast, which is a synonym for Bifrost, the bridge that connects Asgard and Midgard. So it's the ruins of the bridge between the humans and the gods. That's where the name stems from. It says subjects of the lyrics are, among others, the Old Testament and Greek, Roman, and Norse mythology. So a lot of deetic, is that a word? Deetic mythologies. Mythologies about gods. Interestingly, though, this first track is not about any of that. It is about the Roman Empire destroying cities all around them in order to take them over. The final stanza says, the northern eyesight is extinguished, the western limbs are dead, the southern torso is crippled, the east cannot defend. Just before that, I should have started with this. It says, we learned that war has become art within 3 years of suffering and barbarism. So they went to battle for 3 years and they took over all these different cities along the Rhine, I suppose. Says the song is about the frontier of the ancient Roman Empire between today's Germany and Netherlands. And the song is certainly about them setting up camps and attacking castles, laying siege, just taking things over. Talks about, what is it? We have ripple, silence is deceptive, hooves of iron paw, sort of sneaking around on horses. Says an ancient silent fog to blur our castle silhouettes to hide the gathering troops. Black fleets explore the northern lines, 50 forts along the Rhine. Yeah, it talks about sneaking up on these places and attacking. I will say, though, this is interesting. We have sneaking up on rivers, which explains some of the water. We have being on horseback, which explains the whinnying. Nighttime, silence, that's the wind howling. That all of this we had at the beginning of the track. And so they sneak up, and then I would assume that the black metal aspect is the war. It's the noise and chaos of that, and after they're done taking these areas over, they're back to sneaking around, which is the outro of the song, the field recording stuff. Another thing I find interesting is that most of these stanzas are just 2 to 4 lines long, which matches how I heard them in the song. He would say a sentence or two, or from what I heard, he would just make some noises for a second or two, and then we would have another instrumental bit. The vocals were very sparsely used and laid out throughout the track. For a song that only has about 20 lines to it, maybe 30 lines, there wasn't a lot of vocals in the song, which makes sense, not a lot of lines, 13-minute runtime, but the vocals were present throughout the entire song, which just means there's a lot of space between each stanza, which is, yeah, it lines up with the way that it's written. I'm curious if any of this lines up more specifically with the music. At one point it says it was late at night when the bugle call resounded. I wonder if that was right around the time that we had the brass jump into the song for the first time. I don't know that little details like that are going to make me enjoy the song, but I definitely appreciate the vision that's laid out and the execution of that a lot more. Knowing that there's so many callbacks from the lyrics into the sonic component of the song, whether it's through the field recording or instrumentation usage. I think that's pretty cool. Alright, next up we have Soliloquy of the Stigmatized Shepherd. Nice alliteration right there with the S sound. Although they're all different S's, aren't there? We have Soliloquy of the well, that one's the same S, but we have a T, and then shepherd is the SH sound. A little bit different there. We still have the overuse of the S. This is... I was going to say this is the longest one of the album, but it's not. It's the third longest at 15 minutes and 39 seconds. Oh man, we did just finish the shortest of the epics, though. Aside from the interludes, 13 minutes and 38 seconds of 50 forts is the shortest song on the album. Alright, one more track, let's go. So the waiting water pushed us right into this. And so now we have blackened doom metal. Yeah, so like the production here, if you compare this to typical doom metal, which has an emphasis on the bassy sounds of the guitar, it feels large and overwhelming, like a weight pushed on your shoulders. But because this lower fidelity production emphasizes the high end, the treble part of the guitar, it feels less impactful, less weighty. There are some interesting, more positive harmonic ideas right around. That section right there kind of has a bit of uplift to it. It's a little bit more positive than this dreary progression they have throughout most of this. So emotionally, what I get from this is heavy, weighty, but moments of hope. Is that the bass? Well, that explains why I didn't hear the bass in the last song. I don't typically go to toilet humor, but that bass note sounds like someone farting. It is not a great tone for me. It does fit the overall aesthetic, though, I think, but I think it could still be opened up a little bit. I think the main problem isn't the the compression on the bass, but more so that it cuts off so quickly. It's never given time to reverberate at all. It's again another interesting harmonic direction. There it is. Okay, this is kind of neat. Of course, that's short-lived. Back to this section. This is such a cool part. I think it's only amplified because we've now spent 30 minutes with music I haven't quite been a fan of. So to have this moment to myself, it's just even better. Has a nice harmonic idea to it. A good bass sounds. Layers. Harmony. So we are using more field recordings to transfer us between tracks. Alright. I don't know that I have much new to bring up on this one. Many of my criticisms are similar, despite this being death metal for majority of it. Sorry, doom metal rather than black metal. The vocals are still difficult to make out, whether they're doing the depressive black metal vocals or the growling stuff we got towards the end. The production is still not great. I am acclimating a little bit to it. I can hear more things now than I did on the first song. But I could still do with something a bit higher fidelity, more space, more room, more dynamic components to the timbres. I had mentioned at the beginning of this track that it feels just small. It's supposed to be doomy, which is supposed to carry this weight to it, and it just doesn't because the guitars sound so tinny. This also gives a hyper focus on the treble, the high end, rather than the bassy, the low end, and that just doesn't give a lot of impression of largeness or weight. It's the wrong side of the equalizer spectrum to really do that. And so the things that I typically appreciate out of doom metal I don't get through here, so all I get is the repetition without any of the impact that the repetition is supposed to bring. It never quite clicks for me. We do have black metal that picks up around the middle point of the song. We fluctuate back and forth between the faster 16th note playing and the heavier, weightier atmospheric stuff. The song does drag on in places, playing things over and over and over long after they've had any sort of impact or effectiveness for what I think they're aiming to do. All that criticism is it's the same here. It's a different style of playing, but it doesn't address any of the issues I had with the first track. Now, I am curious where this goes, though. As I mentioned last time we broke for analysis, just because an album starts one way doesn't mean it's going to stick that way, and moving towards blackened doom, while still having the blackened component to it, does showcase a new genre. means that going forward we could really go anywhere. Now, granted, we moved back to black metal before the song ended. We'll probably stick there, but the album also surprised me. We had a really cool moment in the middle of the track that was reprised towards the end. We kicked into an eighth note groove on the drums, a nice little guitar riff, a bass lead line that we got for a little bit, and a choir that comes in and presents something kind of catchy. It has a nice melody to it, and we explore some interesting harmonies through here as well, introducing a bit of brightness to an overwhelmingly bleak album so far. I really dig this section. I think it went on just a hair bit too long. Although the choir bit, we only got 4 repetitions total out of it, 2 in the middle, 2 at the end. But the choir melody was given to the guitar to express itself on utilizing it as a jumping off point to find similar variations but not the exact same idea that the choir did. I like this idea as well, passing the baton off and creating a theme and then creating some variations based off of it. There are some neat ideas in this track, it's just that they're so far and few between, and when we touch on them, we either get off of them too quick or we let them hang around for too long. Now, of all this talk of static elements, I do want to bring up one thing that seems to be a little bit dynamic in this track, and it made me re-evaluate some of the stuff we heard in track 1, which is the drumming. Yes, the drumming tends to sit in a pocket for a vast majority of what it does, but when it comes to the fills, the way that we end a section or the way that we end a phrase before we repeat the idea again, there is some dynamic quality to this. It's not always the same fill every time, even when we have 2 fills in relatively close proximity, or even 4 fills in close proximity, they're all different. It almost feels like the drummer is consistently creating new ways to end a phrase. I don't think that's entirely true. I heard some ideas that felt repeated or felt similar to something we had heard earlier, but it is something that sort of stands out, where most of the guitar work, the bass work, all sits within a realm of singular focus. What they do for this one bar is what they'll do for every bar through an entire segment of a song, sometimes multiple minutes worth. There isn't any variation going on at all. The drummer introduces some variation, and it reminded me that this is a drummer-led band. I don't know if the drummer plays the guitar and bass. If they do, that might explain some of the simpler ideas and the heavy use of what I assume is copy-pasting inside of an audio workstation going on for those. You play a sick riff and then you copy-paste it forever and you drum around it. It's sort of the opposite of finding an accompaniment song where the drums are laid out and maybe the bass is laid out and there's no melody on it, and then you get to noodle over the melody, right? You get to practice your improv or write some melodies over it, all sorts of stuff you can do with accompaniment pieces. This is like the opposite of that, where the atmosphere, the harmonic stuff is laid out, but none of the rhythmic stuff is, and the drummer kind of noodles around that. That's kind of what it feels like to me. They're definitely a drummer first, and this album does feel very drum-centric from that perspective. Even when I look at the production, particularly in that song, the drums are quite a bit louder than I would expect, especially given the low-fidelity production. This is making things start to get a bit more sense. The things that I typically look for in music aren't really there, and that's because they're not rhythmic ideas, and we have a rhythmic oriented person creating music outside of what they would typically write. We've talked about this in the past. I, as a melodically driven person who has played trumpet most of my life, find it really difficult to write drum parts that are typical drum parts. A lot of the drum parts I write are kind of weird. They're very melodic. It's the type of drumming I like to listen to as well. And even when we listened to Stuart Copeland, was that his name? Drummer for the Police. When we listened to some of his solo works, including some soundtrack work for, was it Spyro the Dragon? Very rhythmic ideas, lots of counterpoint in rhythm, polymeter, polyrhythmic ideas, despite being given to flutes and violins and glockenspiels and stuff. The ideas were highly rhythmic, lighter on melody. A lot of playing around with hockets as well. Anything that leads to a more percussive sound, even from melodic instruments. There are definitely two parts of music making, and it's very easy, especially when you play an instrument that focuses on one, to slip into that style and allow it to influence your composition. And I think that's what's happening here. To me, it feels like they're more comfortable playing and writing for drums, so that's where we get some of the more interesting ideas. And everything else is, in a sense, sort of functional. We do hear some cool ideas from time to time, but 90% of it, we get very functional guitar and bass work. They're there to build the atmosphere, to create the emotional resonance of the song. What did I want to bring up? Why didn't I write it down? Was that it, really? I do have one thing. I'm curious what the follow through on the viewership of this video is going to be. Most people barely watch most of my videos anyways. I think 10% follow through is about average for me, which feels like people watch the reaction and then duck out before the analysis. It's probably brought down a little bit more from people who start the reaction and then don't even finish that. Probably brings the percentage down for the channel as a whole. But I'm curious if this video is going to be even lower. Not just because it's probably going to be 3 hours, 3.5 hours. Somebody starts it up and like, yeah, I don't know about this. That's a long time. I'm just going to duck out early. But also because that opening song, while there is a large black metal community within the Critical Reactions audience, I think it's a very niche sound overall, being lo-fi black metal and being really long on top of that. I'll be surprised how many people actually make it through the first reaction, much less the first analysis section, which took us to like minute 40 or something in the video. And then even less who's going to make it through the whole video. So I suppose I don't usually have a call to action like this. I'm not a real big fan of call to actions in general, so I push them all to the end of the video. I think everybody understands the general idea of like comment, like, and subscribe. Like everybody tells you to do it. I don't need to do that as well. But anyways, if you reach the end of this video, please comment. Because I don't get to see individual numbers, I just see percentages. I think the percentage follow through on this video is going to be like 3%. The average viewer makes it about 3% of the way into this video before clicking out of it. I think that's going to seem rather accurate, but I am curious if anybody makes it to the end of it, simply because I don't foresee it appealing, neither the analysis nor the music, to a wide number, a wide amount of people in the community. With that said, I wish I remembered that other thing I wanted to bring up. Oh, yeah, harmony. I'm glad I remembered. The first song was overly bleak. The second song still kind of brings a lot of that in. It is weighty, it drags, we have that doomy feel to it. Harmonically, it's heavy. A lot of negative emotion, but there is a sort of uplift at the end of the phrase in that doomier section, and we eventually see a little bit of it in the choir section and in what the guitar picks up after it gets the baton passed to it in the final moments of the track. This song to me is, it's about a stigmatized shepherd. Somebody who is all of their life going to be an outcast, at least as long as they're within this one social circle. The only way they can remove this stigmatism is to find a new group of people, a new social circle to be within, where you no longer carry the same descriptions or events tied to you, anything that would allow people to look down on you. I wonder if those uplifts are little moments of hope, maybe things that this shepherd finds that allows them to make it through a day, or maybe it's just a nice gesture from a person. Anything like that. But I think it's interesting with this title that there would be any sort of hope in it at all. Soliloquy of the Stigmatized Shepherd. Let's dive into some lyrics and see what the story's about from that perspective. Alright, this song is about somebody who's been given immortality and doesn't want it anymore. The final lines are, "Upon the stigma of immortality's burden, Father, make me the seed for a silent meadow." He describes his body as limp as a doomed horse, but he still marches on. He says, "I implore you, O Father, take this noise away from me and save me. This is a burden I was never taught to heave." Yeah, he is just tortured. The body is beginning to break down. It's becoming weak and frail. There's nothing left on this earth that brings him joy. At one point, he says, "How long have I been wandering uphill? My Lord, did you paint these meadows? They are colorless." There's just no joy in his life anymore. We're ready to move on to the next stage of existence, and can't. Has been cursed with immortality. Now, how that works into the music, I don't know. I mean, yeah, the doominess absolutely leans into that. It's the slow plodding, knowing that every step is a next step towards eternity. But even past that, where does the bright hopefulness come from? Those moments of uplift in the song. What's the purpose of that? What's the choir represent? I could stretch it a little bit and say that the choir is a layering of his ideas. He's existed for so long that he finds his own thoughts and opinions and wants to be cycles of things that he's experienced and thought previously, but I really don't think that that's the direction they're going in for it. So I don't know. We're going to move into probably the longest block, I think, of music. We're going to look at the 1.25 minute Rapture, and then the 15 3/4 Blood Vaults. Movement 1, Thy Virginal Malodor. Malodor? Malodor. Like a bad odor? I don't know. It's spelled with a U, but that just might be like a different spelling of odor. I don't know. I'll have to look that word up next break. Let's dive into it, see what's going on. Oh yeah, the storm at the end of the Shepherd's Walk. So this would represent more of a literal rapture. Those eerie tones are the souls being transported, ripped out of their physical hosts. I'm trying to keep in mind metal tends to be over the top. little campy. I think it works within that realm, but camp also has a higher buy-in, and I am not buying into this. I'm tempted to make a cynical content. I can't even think. Comment.
Travelers now within that valley, through the red little windows, see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody.
What is with this? What happened? Even the sample aside, the movement between these three sections is very awkward, and the sample only makes it even stranger. You know, I talked about a couple of analysis sections back that, as strange as some of the production decisions are, they all fit a cohesive vision. The production on that clean vocal, I feel, sits outside that vision. It doesn't feel like it connects to the production on anything else. This song's not even halfway over yet. I honestly feel like I've been here forever. Yeah, definitely too much reverb on that, but it also has too much volume compared to the rest of the band. It just blots them out. So that cleaner electric guitar in that last section was interesting. The same idea from that guitar is back now. The guitars picked up the vocal melody. "15-beat phrase" is a little interesting. That 4-3-4-4 I think was the how I'd break that up. That drum fill I'm starting to hear more of. Dut, 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 dut. 2 hits, a tight roll, and then 3 more hits. See, I think I could really get behind this section if the production were different. It feels so mismatched, and the weight of the whole thing, including the heavily layered choir bit, it's not being presented without the extra bassiness. I had mentioned in that reaction that I wanted to make a cynical comment, and I think I found a way to sort of reword it into something that's a little bit less cynical. I have nothing but respect, I suppose, for people who can sit through this whole album and enjoy it. I mean, it still kind of comes off as a backhanded compliment. I get zero satisfaction out of this. Not an artistic element, not an academic one, not a casual one. I don't enjoy any moment of what I'm listening to. It's a really good reminder just how diverse people's tastes are, but I think it's also a good way of putting into perspective what black metal albums can be. Right? I think we've only listened to like two or three black metal albums for album request. One of them was more of a technical side of things, especially with the drum work. That was Exercises in Futility. And the reason why I said two or three is because I honestly don't remember the others. I know that that can't be the only black metal album we've listened to, but it's the only one that made any sort of impact on me, any sort of impression. Everything else has been black metal, maybe with some unique elements to them. I don't ever remember being as negative in my analyses for any of the other albums. Maybe I was, and I've just blocked it out. But this is just. It just really isn't my cup of tea at all. And it's taking quite a bit to get this down. So instead of going on the usual stuff about atmosphere and vocals and repetition, compression, I just want to focus on some things that I enjoyed, and we'll probably move on rather quickly because this list isn't very long. There are some dynamic elements in Blood Vaults that I quite enjoyed. First of all, the first half is very spacious. While we do have more of the alternating bass and snare, 16th notes on the guitars, growling, full sound kind of thing, we do enter some moments where there's quite a bit of space in the writing and in the production, where sometimes there's only one instrument going, where the drums are playing very slowly, lots of space between each of their individual hits. Spaces where we have room to focus on melodic ideas coming from the guitars or allowing the vocals to do something. This is also the section that gives us a bit of extra groove, focusing on eighth notes on the drums and melodic stuff on the guitar and the choir, which, like I mentioned during the reaction, I do enjoy what's going on there. I thought that moment was pretty well done. Though, as I mentioned, I do think I'd enjoy it with a different production style. The other thing I enjoyed was that there was a clean electric guitar tone that we had in here that was doing some neat things for a brief moment before falling into the pattern of having a riff and playing that riff over and over and over. But I even welcomed that small amount of contrast simply because it was something. At this point, I will take anything, even the new clean vocal we got at the end, singing four notes and then repeating that rhythm over and over and only appearing, I don't know, for 8 bars, maybe tops. I will take that. It's something. It adds to the color of the album in some way. A lot of the album is very samey to me, especially now that we've covered the black metal that we started on and the doomier side of things that Soliloquy went through. Doomy black metal, black and doom metal, whatever this is, seems to be what we're in store for. And with 3 of our 5 songs finished, I'm going to assume that that is going to be what the album primarily resides in. I will be very surprised if tracks 5 or 7 move in a direction other than one of those two. Also, with all the tracks having a very similar production, I'm going to say that even if we aren't playing black metal, a blackened lo-fi production is going to be what we are listening to in our final two songs. So, having any sort of new sounds, whether it's a new style of delivery from an instrument we've heard, or a new instrument altogether, or a new instrumentalist, in this case, a vocalist, anything like that is going to be really fresh to my ears. I am parched, and even the dirtiest water tastes phenomenal right now. Please give me something other than what we've listened to. But I look around and I see a desert around me. I'm not expecting anything else. This is what I'm in store for the next 33 minutes of my life. And there's just no escape from it. If I find a drop of water, I will cherish it, but I won't expect more. That is where I sit at the halfway point, a little over the halfway point of this album. I suppose the brass that we heard in the first track gets grouped into that area, as well as just a new sound. It never came back in another track. It was just for that song, much as the female vocals probably for this one. And what did we didn't have anything in Soliloquy, did we? That was a unique. Oh, we also had the clean electric guitar in Blood Vaults. This last song. So this one actually had a bit of contrast in it sonically, which I appreciate. Not enough contrast, but again, it's something. I do want to bring up just one thing on the production side. As I mentioned, I'm not a fan of the production, but it is a cohesive sound. Everything works together to present a specific atmosphere and an emotion to go along with that. The clean vocals in here do not work within that. They sound separated from it. It sounds like an additional component that has been duct taped onto the sound. It is too loud and covers up the guitars and the drums and the bass. The reverb doesn't match what's going on. It feels like it was recorded elsewhere. There are certainly ways that you can introduce timbral changes to an instrument. We see this in rock all the time when they might give them a hyper compressed sound for a sentence or two in order to make it sound like they're singing out of a megaphone, or to give them a little bit of extra grit that maybe they don't want to or can't apply naturally. Maybe they just want that specific electronic sound to it. There's a lot of, I mean, even pop music can shift into the robotic, turned all the way up to 100% auto tune stuff to get that specific effect before returning back to more of a natural sound to the vocals. There's lots of ways that vocal production can shift over the course of a song, but still sound like it fits within the palette that the song is being presented in, and these vocals simply don't. They don't match, they're not mixed well, they sound completely devoid from the song itself, almost as if another song were playing on top of what I was listening to. And I will point to that, at least, as not a fantastic production decision, unless maybe there is an artistic purpose behind it. Is it supposed to sound outside of the song? This, we just had a track about a guy calling out to God, and the description of the band stated that they often dealt with gods, regardless of which pantheon of gods. It could be that this song is about a deity speaking to somebody, and that's why the voice is booming and reverberative and sounds outside the song, because it's supposed to be outside our realm, outside the corporeal to the spiritual. Yeah, I might give it a pass for that, but it's also just a bit too over the top, and I think that there could be a way to achieve a similar experience with retaining the sonic palette of what the album has been doing since the very first minute. So that would be where I appreciate the vision, but I do have criticism about the execution. I don't know, let's get into the lyrics. I know this was a bit of a shorter analysis segment, but as I mentioned earlier, I think they're all going to be that way because I've pretty much said my piece about all of this. Many of the songs feel and sound the same to me. I'm getting the exact same information and talking points out of them. I'm not really seeing a lot of growth across the album, and since all of the songs sound very similar to my ear, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think I'm just the wrong reactor for this album. I'm not really feeling much of a development across the album of ideas. It's just a minor variation of the concept. We have black metal and doom, and we just hear a lot of that, and it all sounds the same to me. And I really feel like we've listened to 40 minutes of the same concept for the most part, with some minor deviations from that, such as the big choir here, the choir in track 2, the brass in track 1, the ambient section from tracks 2 and 4, and the field recording transitions between songs, but also with track 3, Rapture, being entirely that. There are these, what do we call them? Not deviations, but like when diversions from the core thing. This album's made up 90% of a core experience, and eventually, sometimes, it's like, okay, now look over here real quick while I set the next trick up, and the next trick is the same one you've already watched 5 times and already know the answer to. But this magician doesn't seem to get it. No, I'm kidding. That was a bit cynical, I'll admit, but if you enjoy this trick, this album probably absolutely works for you. I didn't enjoy it the first time though. Let's hit some lyrics, see what's going on. Rapture only has 4 lines. O head of blood and wounds, in pain and deathly scorned, arouse their bliss and rapture with a crown of thorns adorned. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the crown of thorns harkens back to imagery of Christ, and rapture is a Christian thing about the end of times, pulling up all of God's most devout followers away from earth to heaven. But I don't quite get that. Blood vaults, I'm not going to go into much detail on. There's some grotesque depictions of it, but it appears to be about the pain and suffering that the Catholic Church doled out during the Dark Ages in order to keep control over the people that they governed over, and to ensure that the Catholic Church stayed in power. There's a lot of, what would you call it? I can't think of the word, torture going on at the time. And yeah, it goes into quite a bit of detail about blood on dungeon walls and some of the things that were done in order for all this to stay in power. The annotation states that blood vaults, this is called 1, Thy Virginal Malador. So this is the first part of the Blood Vaults series. Blood Vaults 2 appears on a different album, and there is a third album called Blood Vaults, The Blazing Gospel of Henrik Kramer, and that can be seen as the third part of the series. I suppose all the tracks in there are a collective third part of this trilogy. According to Alexander, says that this series of works, the Blood Vault series, reflects the history of shame of the Catholic Church. Like I said, this one seems to depict primarily the physical violence that was enacted upon people. All right. Based on title alone, although this is the longest singular track on the album, but even without that, based on title alone, I'm not looking forward to this. It's called Soil of the Incestuous. After this is a 2 minute and 40-second interlude. I don't know if we'll run right into that or if I'll group that with the final track. We'll see how this song ends and how I want to play that out. I'm going to rewind it back just a little bit so we can hear this transition. That's something I forgot to do earlier, but I think it's done all right for us so far, primarily because the transitions are field recording. They exist outside of the songs. All right, let's hit it. Oh yeah, the church. I'm glad I rewinded. I forgot about the bells, which makes sense. It was a song about the Catholic Church.
I remembered far too late the words of the witch I had loved. That there are eyes within our eyes. Only these inner eyes see the truth of the matter. That there are dreams within our dreams.
Well, if nothing else, it's nice to hear the bass so present on this mix. Have a reverb drenched guitar with a really nice melody-ish line to it. It is outlining chords primarily. As usual though, just a hair bit too many repetitions of this idea. I'm also noticing that having the vocals as indiscernible as they are, being more of a texture, puts more focus on the guitar work, which isn't doing enough to carry that spotlight. I think for this type of production, because death metal sometimes does this as well, you really need to have strong instrumental work. Although, again, that's not much of a criticism about the album as it is about this type of music in general.
folks dance primal dances. Strange night birds chirping in the darkness.
I'm going to have to bring something up during the analysis section because what I'm looking at doesn't make any sense to me. But this is our opening again. See, this is a neat little moment. This is also an instrument with a strange production given everything else. That was interesting.
I will never let you go. Your blood is my blood, your mind is my mind, your body my body. It will do you no good to
Muted again. That's what I'm talking about, though. As far as pacing goes, why did we listen to that line 50 times before it faded out and the alien voice dude came in? Why couldn't we have done that 30, 20, even 10 would have felt like a while. 3.5 minutes of that guitar riff and drum pattern were way too much. There is a thing of diminishing returns. Length will craft a specific experience. You cannot create something that feels epic in a 3-minute song. Time is an important element in the creation process. But just because it's longer doesn't mean it's better. And I feel like so many of these songs are long because the person just wants long songs. They think that they're better because they're longer, that these sections have more impact or more weight. Because I was forced to listen to them 100 times instead of 20. I think you can. It's not even just diminishing returns. There is a point when you start getting inverse returns. Like, there's a point where a phrase will feel lengthy and weighty, and it'll have that epic, larger scale because we've been in it in a long time. There's a few repetitions past that where it's still going to feel epic, but you're not getting anything extra from having replayed this phrase for those extra times. And then there's a point past that when it stops feeling epic and starts feeling like a drag. It's missing the pacing and it starts removing any positivity from that. And I think this album as a whole consistently drifts into that side of sitting in ideas for too long. Now, I don't want to say that's across the board. There are some lengthier sections that I think are fine, they just don't work for me. But there is at least one section in each track that I know for a fact could probably be cut in half without losing any effect from the length. And that ending right there is definitely one for Soil of the Incestuous. There's just no need for it to exist for so long. It gains nothing and actually loses some elements because of that. And unfortunately, those handful of moments are tainting my overall experience with this. I don't think I would be as upset or as irritated by this album if it were 25 minutes shorter. And I'm not talking about removing any specific section from the album, just give me some of these sections less. We could really cut this album down to under an hour, and I think it would be improved across the board. Now, I do want to say I started that sentence with I think it would be improved, which means that's subjective. That is my opinion. I know for a fact I would enjoy it more. That is something I do know. But I do think that it would be artistically superior. That doesn't mean that everybody would enjoy it better. But, yeah, I can't with these sections that is just really a guitar and a drum playing the same thing for minutes on end. It is absolutely infuriating to listen to. Once is fine. You give me this song in isolation and it would be a footnote of the analysis segment. You give me this whole album where it happens constantly though, and it is the only thing I can focus on. It is and I think the worst part is the things that I do enjoy just breezes right by. This dude drives 5 miles per hour through the most boring sections, and he does something interesting, and he floors it to 100 to get out of there. I can't. Is this album? I'm not the audience for this album, and unfortunately, I don't seem to have the patience or even the ear to get an artistic or even an analytical appreciation for what's going on in it. It just is not clicking with me on any level. And I know this is like the third time I've said it. I don't know, man. I do have a couple of things I want to talk about, though. One, I'm picking up something structure-wise. This would normally be something I talk about earlier in an album, usually after the third or fourth track. Well, I mean, here I'm talking about it after the fourth track, so it just happens to be that the fourth main song is at the end of the album. The structure, the way that these songs are built is odd. He'll find ways to smoothly move between some ideas, to build out of some concepts. There is a nice fluidity through a majority of the moments. And then there'll just be a random stop into something totally parallel to anything that's happening, a massive tangent. And then we'll do another hard stop and go back to the black metal or back to the doom. And those moments just make no sense to me if I think that the length that we spend in sections disrupts the pacing. These wild transitions also are disruptive to the pacing of the song in a way that works against but in parallel to the length of some of these sections. It just, many times throughout this album, I have myself questioning what led to a decision. Why did we go to this section? Why did we have it at all? And why was it not a smooth transition into or out of it? For this song specifically, we had that really strange sampled line in the middle of this track at like 7 minutes into it. We just stop what we were doing. We have this sample and then we kick back into some black metal. No connection to any of it. It's as if I was channel surfing. And I went to another channel, heard something completely different, said, I don't want that, and just hit the return button to go back to the channel I was on. It makes no sense within the context of the song. Maybe it makes sense within the context of the lyrics, and maybe that sample means something within the themes of this song, but musically it is beyond disruptive. And I don't get it. I'm going to be honest, I'm getting a bit ornery right now. I can hear it in my vocal delivery, the way I'm saying words, and I'm kind of losing my ability to not dip into cynicism. I don't know, man. I don't get those decisions though. They make no sense to me. They are just super disruptive. It's weird that I want to praise them though because they give me something other than the black and doom. And so I kind of like them because it's a moment of genuine something close to silence. It's just I don't have 16 notes every bar being crammed into my head. So as much as I don't like them artistically, I appreciate them in the moment because I get to listen to just some dude talking in a normal voice without any noise around him, and that's kind of nice. There's a solo in this track. I thought that was cool. The production on it was weird. I'm not going to focus on that. It had some basic guitar ideas. Oops, so sorry. It had some basic guitar ideas in it, but it also had some shred in it, which I didn't know this dude had access to skill wise. As far as I know, he's just a drummer, so it's pretty cool that we could get a little bit of that in there. And that was a nice little diversion from everything. We also have the samples that I just talked about there, but they're cropping up all over this album. Are they supposed to tie together into anything? None of the annotations on any of these sets of lyrics on Genius have anything about where these samples come from. Maybe they're not samples at all. They're just recorded in a way that sounds like they were recorded or ripped off of VHS tapes, and maybe it's just the dude saying stuff. And I guess that would be kind of cool. And the bass was in this one, so I enjoyed that. We kicked off the song with a ton of bass, and after the first section, they got sucked right back up into the vacuum of the production, and you never heard from them again. I don't even know if they were still playing the rest of the track. Big question hanging over my head, is this prog? It didn't really hit me until this track. It probably should have clicked with me on track 4. Yes, this is Black into Doom. I think that is definitely the home base. It makes up like 70-80% of the album. But there's quite a bit of ambient sections. We have a plethora of instruments. We've had brass, we've had choirs, we've had female vocals. We have clean electric guitars. We have reverbed electric guitars. And besides the general third wave black metal and the slower, doomier stuff, we do explore stuff that I think I would probably call post-rock with a blackened metal production. I don't know. It's a weird combination of things where they explore the way that sounds work against silence, especially, well, it's not really silence, it's just quieter than the black metal parts. And so there is this idea of smashing together a lot of things. It's just that in the realm of prog, it's usually more of an even distribution of influences, whereas here it's like 80% black metal or doom metal, and then occasionally we'll go off and explore something wildly different. These moments are usually also what I tend to connect with most, and as I mentioned, they're also the ones that get ripped away from me the quickest, but I can't help but think that there is at least an attempt to make this somewhat progressive. Now, I don't listen to a lot of black metal albums. I certainly don't listen to a lot of black and doom metal albums, but I don't get the feeling that many bands would approach adding these moments into the songs. I just kind of envision these albums to be pure black metal from start to finish, and maybe an interlude at the end of a song to take us into the next, or a way to bring it down. I don't even know, man. Like I said, I don't listen to a lot of black metal. For a lot of the reasons I've stated, I don't like the genre. Um, but yeah, like, is this supposed to be? Would anybody else classify this under prog, or would you just call it black and doom metal? The last thing I want to talk about, I don't even know how to approach this because it makes no sense to me. I said I was going to talk about this during the reaction. I wanted to know how big this band was, or at least this album. It's a 2009 album. It is a bit older. Coming up on 15 years, no? Yeah. September, it'll be 15th year anniversary of Reign Upon the Impure. How popular is this? Because, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I really don't think I'm going to see a lot of people watching this whole video through. It doesn't really sit too strongly with my core audience. At least I don't think so. Black metal does okay in the analytics, but it's nothing like what prog metal or prog rock tend to do. It makes me think that I have a generally prog side of an audience here. But I figured, what's the world view this group as? So Ruins of Beverast on Spotify have 18,000 monthly listeners. That is not a lot compared to some of the big names, even just in metal, but it also isn't anything to sneeze at. That is a nice amount of people. 18,000. I would kill to have 18,000 unique monthly listeners on Spotify. That's awesome. Here's the weird thing, though. Maybe it's just this album. The most popular song listened to 645,000 times is Rapture. That 1 minute interlude completely created a field recordings that comes between Soliloquy of the Stigmatized Shepherd and Blood Vaults. How is that the most listened to track? Why is that the most listened to track? And it's not even by a small amount. 650,000 almost. The next closest is 195,000. A third of the number of plays. And it is the other interlude, track 6, the one we're going into, the 2 minute and 40-second song. After that, at 150,000 plays, is the first track, which makes sense. You put an album on, you're going to listen to the first song. That's at 150,000. Nothing else even breaks the 100,000 mark, and the plays progressively go down as the tracks do, with track 2 sitting at 91,000, track 4 at 76, track 5 at 70, and the final track at 53,000. What sense does this make? The people who like this album, who listen to it the most, only listen to the songs that, at least based on Rapture, have nothing to do with the album. In fact, there's no music in Rapture. I'm interested to get to track 6 next to see what's going on in there. Because 240, that's long enough to be a song. That doesn't have to be an interlude like Rapture was. It certainly could be, but I'm expecting some metal to be played there. Let me rephrase that. I'm expecting instruments to be played there. I don't think we're going to have almost 3 minutes of field recording. But it's also not one of the 2-digit epics that this album is comprised of. It just blows my... I don't get it. Can someone explain that one to me? Was there something to do with Rapture? Did it show up in a movie or something? Was it the only I was going to say, was it the only single, but why would you release that as your single? Like, it just makes no sense to me. I don't... I thought it was just the music that would confuse me, but even the people who listen to this album confuse me. That's a first, okay? That's never happened before. Let me read some lyrics, see what's going on with Soil of the Incestuous, and then we're gonna listen to our final 17 and a quarter minutes of music of the album. Someone save me. The lyrics to this make... It basically is a series of statements that say, I am complex. I am more than one thing. I am a three-dimensional person. You can't put me in a box. And it says that by stating that I am exact opposites of things. And some of these opposite of things are so strange. He kicks it off, right? Rule of threes right here. Let's go into this. 2 things that are normal and a third thing that's only there because it's weird and you need the other 2 to really make context of it. This is usually done in science fiction where they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm just as smart as Einstein, or why can't I think of smart people? And then they'll like drop a completely fictional name, or Jeffrey Righty Williams or something. And like, you know that person's smart in this universe because he's compared to 2 smart people that are in our universe as well, right? Rule of threes. You set up 2 things to create a pattern, so the third one, which by itself means nothing to the audience, means something here. So he says, I am the wandering moon and sun. Okay, so you're the moon and the sun, opposites. I'm the rabbit and the snake. Okay, prey and predator, I got this. I am the virgin and the rapist. There are so many different opposites you could use in this world to finish off this trio. And you chose the virgin and the rapist. And they're not even necessarily opposite sides of the spectrum. You can be... I don't even know, man. That is a line. And he wraps up the stanza with, I am my shadow. The second stanza says, I enter the church and the graveyard, the storms and the rainbows, the soul and the flesh. I enter my shadow. The final stanza says, I suffer the rotten lower skin. Again, really interesting choice of words. I suffer the wandering moon and the sun, the sin and altruism. I suffer my shadow. It is... I don't know, man. I gave some benefit of the doubt to some of the earlier sets of lyrics. I think that there was some stuff going on in them, and they leaned into specific themes. And here, this is to the point where metal reaches a level of absurdity that you really have to either take in stride, whether go along with the campiness of it or laugh at the absurdity of it, or you just have to walk away from because it's past your threshold of disbelief, right? This is the point of buying in where I can't anymore. I wish I was coming into the final leg of this album in a much better mood. We finished the track up. The bloom will fail to come. I wear reflected scars until I smash the mirror. And I just can't. It's so edgy. This whole song is so edgy. Now, granted, all the songs have had some edge to them. I mean, we talked about the Blood song, Blood Vaults, the one just prior to this, which was visual depictions of some of the torture that the Catholic Church dished out. Yeah, that's certainly an edgy song, but at least I feel like it has a meaning to it. A meaning beyond itself. I mean, yeah, the shock value is there, but the shock value is there to showcase some of the horrendous things that a real life group of people have done in history. It's historical, it's knowledge, it's useful, and the shock value is there because it adds to the understanding of the event. You can't sugarcoat everything in life. This is just saying, hey, look at me, I'm an edgy kid. And like maybe it's supposed to be saying more than that, but that's all I'm getting out of it, unfortunately. And it's called Soil of the Incestuous, and just like that's not a that's just an edgy name too, right? I don't know. Maybe someone can prove me wrong. I'm kind of hoping we move into the last track here and I have a better reception to those lyrics, much like it did the past three. And this one stands out as an outlier. But as I stand right here, this is not a song I enjoyed musically, and it's not even something I can get behind lyrically, which is a first for the album. As I'm not really a huge fan of the language of the album, but I do think each song has explored ideas lyrically that have worked. And this one doesn't. These feel like things I would find in the notebook of a gothy teenage kid. Honestly, sounds like something I wrote as an edgy emo kid. So I say this poking fun a little bit at it and a little bit at myself. I do see who I was in some of this, and I also understand, having grown up and moved out of this, just how empty and vapid I was then, and this also feels vapid in parallel. And maybe that is me introducing some bias to the track and injecting something into it that isn't there. Again, like I said, if anyone else has a different perspective on it, please let me know. Also, how does the longest song on the album have the least amount of lyrics? Just riddle me that, Batman. Let's wrap this up. Balnaa-Kheil the Bleak. Kale the Bleak. That's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And it runs into our final track, Rain Upon the Impure. That's our title. The second shortest of the epics at 14 and a half. Buckle up, 17 minutes to go. Let's get through it. So I'm also going to back this up a little bit, a couple of seconds, so that we can remember where we were in our transition. Oh, it's the alien voice, right? Still need it. Let's go. Also, every single one of these tracks is connected, and yet there is no lyrical connection, not even just a story, but thematically. I understand that you can connect the songs for musical needs. Maybe you just want to see if you can make an album that doesn't stop. But typically, which isn't a slight against this album, but typically, you would connect songs that have meanings together. And every single one of these moves into each other, and they couldn't be more different in their topics, themes. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be any music to this. I want to remind everybody, this is the second most listened to track on this album. Well, we have Rain on the track Rain Upon the Impure. So I just had the lyrics pulled up. I could hear, kind of, and attribute specific syllables to the words. But the rhythmic element was so weird. That would have sounded terrible if it had been cleaned using that same rhythmic and inflective writing. See? We just randomly stop for some sample and then do something totally different. And it just... Even if we had a harsh transition from where we were into this, I think that would be a much better transition than what we got. I mean, the rain's here, right? This is how the song's gonna... Nope. Interesting placement of the rain, then. And interesting decisions have a big rock ending. Yeah, a little bit of tribute to heavy metal there, with the drummer going crazy and then slowly playing less and less notes, almost slowing down the BPM just for the drummer while the guitar is just shredding, and then finishing on a really big chord that leads into a chord progression that finishes the song off. I'm going to wrap this video up with one topic. I use the word interesting in this album a lot. A lot of interesting decisions for black metal. The production is predictable at times. It's lo-fi black metal, and then other times it does stuff that I can't expect. I have no idea why he decided to produce something a specific way. It makes no sense to me, and usually disrupted my listening experience, but that doesn't make it a bad decision. It just makes it an interesting one, a unique one, an odd one, I think, maybe even at worst. That ending right there was very interesting. The sample usage throughout the choir. Those proggier atmospheric moments, going for an ambience rather than an overwhelming attack that doom and black metal typically have. The plethora of instruments that show up in one song each. I questioned last time if this was a prog album. I don't think that question is too important anymore. I think what should be, and talked about, and what I should have landed on then instead, was that all of these decisions make the album unique. And I think that's a really big piece of praise for something that holds so much inspiration from third wave black metal, a style and era of music that influenced, not to be discrediting, but a lot of iterative bands. Anytime I bring up how uniform black metal is without mentioning third wave specifically, there's usually one person in the comments who says, actually, that's just third wave. Second wave and post black metal are full of experimentation. And yes, that is true. I use black metal typically as a shorthand for the third wave stuff that took off in popularity and that a lot of bands look up to and emulate. But it is just one part of black metal's history. But I do find this to be wildly inventive, despite using so much of that lo-fi third wave sound and composition as a foundation. And whether I enjoyed it or not, the fact that this album escapes me on an analytical level, the fact that I asked, why did they do that so often in this album, speaks at least to a type of experimentation. I suppose a more subjective take would lean towards if that experimentation was well executed. I leave that up to everybody. Y'all know my take on that. I'm not going to go into it again, but I don't think I did enough to credit Alexander, was that his name? For putting this all together by themselves. It is a lot of things, and it colors quite a bit outside of the lines. But it is a passion project by one person that does a lot of stuff I would not expect this sound to do. And while it wasn't quite effective for me, I do want to give that praise to them for trying something new out of trying to push the boundaries of this stagnant sound. With that said, I think we'll push into the lyrics here, and as the annotation states, it's a song where some sort of person, being, deity, maybe even, condemns a violent Christ-like figure who intends to rid the world of evil, but fails to. The very first stanza kicks off, "You who first cast the stone, are you adorned with wings? How could you silently suffer the sight of your dreams' wreckage?" So, you tell me that I'm not good enough. You throw that first stone, but you don't have wings. You're not an angel. You're not God. You're over here silently suffering, though, because your dream to rid evil failed. Evil is still here. This whole song is pretty much just goading him. Even at one point says, when the bread is broken, wounds are nailed into the palms, referencing the Last Supper and, of course, the crucifixion, just rubbing salt in the wound. That is what this is about. And again, trying to tie themes to everything else on here. All these songs feel separated. I don't see a through line on any of them. Sure, there's a religious component to most of them, but not all of them. The album kicks off with a song about the Roman Empire taking over nearby places. But yet every song is connected, usually with some sort of field recording that matches what's going on in it. And it's almost like slipping through time or memories or something, going to all these different points. And I don't know. Again, it's one of those decisions. It's a vision and it's executed upon. I can't make heads or tails of it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't mean that it was a bad decision. It just means that I don't understand it. That wraps up my thoughts on this album. What are yours? Did you enjoy it? Did you make it to the end? Did you listen to all 79 minutes with me? Or did you skip through? I don't blame you if you did. Let me know in the comments section. Let me know if you think I was wrong about anything. I'm sure some will. Let me know if you have contrasting opinions or perspectives on this. If you have a completely different take than I did, I'm all ears. You know, as I say, every time that a song goes over my head or an album goes over my head, I really look to the comment section to help me appreciate this work more than I did by myself. Because I'm not perfect. I pick up on a lot of stuff in music. I don't pick up on everything, and sometimes there's just works that I don't get. And as much as I like to pass along my knowledge and what I hear in music, it's just as important that I open my ears and listen to what other people hear and what they take out of music as well. Above the comment section in the description box is a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. That sounds right. I'm still getting used to the time change. The U.S. went through, we didn't go through. We entered into daylight saving time. So the UTC, we have a different relationship to that now. I think we're +5. No, we're +4 now. See, I'm confused now still. We're +4. So 11 a.m. Eastern Standard, 3 p.m. UTC. We'll be doing a live stream, lasts for 2 hours. Hop in anytime within that 2 hours. We sit around, we chit chat, we get off topic and talk about all sorts of stuff. And more importantly, we listen to music. 10 songs every Sunday. Most Sundays, anyways. And then Monday, of course, we're going to start next week's theme, which is Sinister Tones, which, coming off of this, I'm not too stoked about, because this was kind of sinister, and I don't really want more of it right now. Anyways, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical. I know I leaned a little cynical today. I apologize for that. No one's perfect. I think I do a pretty good job of embodying that. What do you call it? Subtitle? A motto of the channel? What would you call that? I don't know. I do a pretty good job of embodying it, but it's impossible to always be critical. But we should always try our best to strive for it. And part of that, like I mentioned, is getting other perspectives. I think that's going to help me see this in a less cynical perspective. So those comments, I mean it. I am looking forward to them. I'm going to read every single one on this video. I want to see if other people took something different. I'm rambling now. This is what happens all the time in the live streams. Be critical, not cynical, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.